Who was here for the chili cook-off last weekend? All right. So, Megan, why don't you come on up? I want to introduce you to Megan Leigh. Everybody give Megan a nice round of applause. So, Megan, I'm pulling her up on stage for two reasons. One reason is that when we did Friendsgiving or late, I guess, in 2022, you took some time and kind of shared your story. And I said, hey, let's circle back to that. I think this series that we're doing in January, February might be really good for you to reshare that story. And so she's going to be sharing in just a moment. The reason I pulled her up on stage is that you got second place in the chili cook-off. Yeah. And there's the winner right there, Cedric, who now can become the villain, okay? But Cedric won, but the way he won, there's a story attached to that. And so I thought if you could share that and then share why, the greater reason that you're here. But will you give another round of applause for Megan this morning?
Starting with the chili cook-off, worth noting my degrees in culinary arts. I'm formerly a chef, so I'm okay at cooking. And I have 3 kids. My oldest son, Atlas, is an old soul, and integrity is really important to him. And so at the start of the chili cook-off, he came to me and said, Mom, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but is it okay if I don't vote for you? If I don't like yours the best? I said, sure, that it won't hurt my feelings. He said, I'm going to try all of them, and I'm going to vote for the one that I like the best. And he voted for Cedric. My other 2 children voted for me. And at the end, after Cedric won the mac and cheese prize and the chili prize, David came to me and said, you got second place. It was 17-16. And my son Atlas heard that, and he was devastated. He had a lot of guilt about not voting for his mom. So I fed him the leftover chili for dinner that night. But next year, I'm going to try harder. Matt asked me to speak at our Friendsgiving service in November, and I felt like the most unlikely person to do that. So Matt doubled down this time and asked me to share my story during this series on relationships and on Valentine's weekend, no less. And once again, I feel like the least qualified person in the room to be up here speaking. Relationships have been a major pain point in my life. As a codependent, I have pursued relationships with unhealthy people out of fear of being alone. I've ignored red flags to avoid being abandoned. And I've given all of my time and energy to others, often leaving none for myself. I've experienced the agony of partners lost to alcoholism, addiction, suicidal tendencies, and narcissistic personality disorder. I've experienced the trauma and hopelessness of abuse. I have stayed in bad relationships long past their expiration date and ended up abandoning myself and any semblance of spirituality in the process. 6 months ago, around the time I came to Watershed, I separated from my husband of 10 years. Exiting my marriage came with a diagnosis of complex PTSD, making safety plans, moving, working with 3 therapists, group therapy, starting a new career from scratch at age 40, and becoming a single mom to my 3 beautiful kids. I set out to find a purpose beyond wife, mother, object. One of my therapists encouraged me to find a space where I could have in-person conversations with others around spirituality and faith practice. I ignored that advice for several months, but in a rock-bottom moment, I reached out to a friend who told me about Watershed and Preface. This led me face-to-face with the 2 relationships I've given the least amount of energy towards in my life, myself and spirituality. As a lifelong agnostic and sometimes atheist, I struggled to understand what spirituality even meant to me and how it could fit into my life. I began to relate to the concept that it's an energy that exists in connection with self, others, nature, and the unseen. I realized I've experienced this energy as a state of flow in sports, creating art, reading, and cooking, a state of awe while watching sunsets, stargazing, and backpacking, a state of love with children, friends, and my sister, a state of erotic and grounded, healthy connection with a lover and songs that give me goosebumps. Once I found a concept I could relate to, I pulled on the string to see what would unravel. I came upon a quote by Audre Lorde, the magnificent poet and activist, that resonated with me on a deep level. In her essay, Uses of the Erotic, Erotic is Power, she describes, "The erotic is a measure between the beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings. It is an internal sense of satisfaction to which, once we've experienced it, we know we can aspire. For having experienced the fullness of this depth of feelings and recognizing its power, in honor of self-respect, we can require no less of ourselves." I began to deconstruct it. The beginnings of my own sense of self is exactly what I've discovered in the process of disentangling myself from toxic relationships. I learned that in lacking a sense of self separate from others, I also lacked a sense of self-worth. In EMDR therapy processing, I've worked to deprogram the false belief that my needs don't matter and reprogram the belief that I am worthy of surrounding myself with people who value my worth and honor my needs. My needs matter. I now define myself with a capital S, my source energy, my spirit, my inner knowing, my intuition, my higher power. I can hear her voice now when I practice mindfulness, pray, or lie awake in the middle of the night. She stands in her authority. The chaos of our strongest feelings, without a doubt, chaos has been a common thread in my relationships and emotional dysregulation. The author of Good Boundaries and Goodbyes, Lisa TerKeurst, says, "Where there is an abundance of chaos, there's usually a lack of boundaries." And come to find out, my whole life I've had a false understanding of what boundaries are. I've learned that boundaries are agreements we make to keep ourselves safe, free, at peace, and loved. Boundaries are not meant to control others, for control is the near enemy of love. Y'all, I have been doing boundaries and love wrong for 40 years. Practicing this crucial skill has given me a tool in controlling the chaos in my life. And in lieu of a New Year's resolution, I jumped on the Word of the Year bandwagon and made my word for 2023 boundaries. In my time at Watershed, I've found a connection between love and relationships, erotic energy and wisdom, spirituality and spiritual experience. I've shortened the distance between my sense of self and the chaos of my feelings. And now that I've experienced this power, in honor of self-respect, I can require no less of myself. In closing, I'd like to share a simple self-compassion meditation or prayer that has stitched together the highest and lowest moments of my experience. May I be free. May I be at peace. May I be loved. May I be safe. Thanks.